Here we are again, boys. Another episode.
Here we are.
Welcome into it.
You guys ever wonder how we ever got to the state that we are in America? At least
Lots of drugs.
the history of like our presidents and stuff like that. Lots of drugs.
Probably. Hey, man, we didn't have cameras back then. We don't know what they're doing.
What's on your mind?
I was kind of thinking a little bit more of how we got to this point. I'm sure you guys have heard of Roosevelt and how he inevitably have had 4 terms. 4 terms. So that's 16 years of presidency.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
That's a generation and a half.
Yeah.
A generation and a half of time that he took to be president. Even now, I'm pretty certain some people in office currently are trying to make sure that they can get another term too.
Yeah, we've been hearing a lot about that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because if you look at it state-wise, like we live in Illinois right now. If you look at it state-wise, we have like different governing bodies, like the governor, the lieutenant governor, attorney general, and so on. They all have limits and of a term. So 1 term for them is 4 years, and they can continuously keep going and running. The state level.
Just a state level.
Yeah, state level. They can just keep running and running and running until obviously they can't anymore. But federally, like at one point after Roosevelt, they were like, okay, we're done. And even prior to Roosevelt, there were times where I believe it was George Washington, Jefferson, and Adams. At one point, they turned down a 3rd term simply because they didn't want to anymore. And I think the government tried to bring that up and amend the Constitution to actually put those in way earlier than we actually did. I remember looking at an article, I believe it was like 1780 something, where they tried to implement amendments to really just have 2 term limits. And it wasn't until 1951 when right after Roosevelt, or not right after Roosevelt, but after that happened, they really actually made the amendment. It was the 22nd Amendment in the Constitution to actually keep it to 2 term limits, just in general.
For the president, yeah.
Yeah, for the president. I mean, that's the executive branch, but the other branches have different limits, which if you look at the legislative branch in Congress, the House of Representatives, they have 2-year limits, and they have no term limits. They can consistently run over and over again. And the Senate can do the same, but their limits are 6 years.
Their terms are 6 years long,
Yeah,
but they have no
their
term limit.
terms are 6 years
Yeah,
long.
their terms are 6 years long, and they have elections every time. But if nothing changes, much like we have it now, you're gonna have the same people running for both the House and the Senate.
Incumbents are always favored, pretty much, right?
Yeah,
They got the foot in the door.
Familiarity, right?
yeah, and I mean with the familiarity, I think that's how we got to where we at right now. Just in general, people in Congress have similar interests to maybe keep their own wealth in the sense of that.
So why do you think it's important to have these term limits?
I think it's important to have these term limits because it will help with accountability and keeping the checks in Congress, not just the executive branch, but keeping the checks in Congress so that we can get fresh ideas, new ways of governing, and just keep moving the dial forward so that we could all benefit rather than...
Gotcha. So you're saying so one person doesn't accumulate too much power.
Yeah.
Gives new thoughts and new ideas to a chance to come in and flourish. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, but also having term limits would force change in government because one person, like, they'd reach the amount of terms they can have. And so they can't run for re-election even if they want to, which forces that seat to become vacant, and because no incumbent is running for it, it opens it up to any new potential candidate.
Now, what could be unfortunate is if you have like a really good elected official who like really has done so much good and now they're being forced out, right? So there's like that side of the coin, right?
True, but the good news is that there's so many people that like there's more than just the 535 good people. So like a new good person can come in. But the other thing too, if someone in that situation, like that person can still do good for the government, just work in a different capacity, right? Or like, if someone runs for the House and they reach their term limits, and then, I mean, in theory, they could transition to Senate and then continue serving in the legislature, but just now they're a senator instead of a representative, and so they can keep being a good person.
Yeah, but I mean, I think
a good person.
I think a lot of people agree that term limits are probably a good thing, right?
I
It's a
definitely
great
think
check
so.
on power, and really on every position of political structure, there should be some kind of term limits, any higher ranked position, because you just, when you stay in that position for too long, you start creating channels of potential corruption, right? You might know this guy, you might know this guy. Those relationships get strengthened, and sometimes the American people can pay the price for something like that, right? And so I think one of the best things that term limits do is they just cut that off. They cut that person off from power. And so it can limit how much corruption can go on, because hopefully you recycle through these people and have someone who come in who doesn't use those mediums of corruption, and those relationships fall through, right?
Yeah. And I think the term limits should extend beyond. I think term limits should apply to every single elected and appointed position. Like Supreme Court and all court justices, state legislatures, as well as the federal, like any and all, because
We're not short on people.
yeah, exactly. We're not short on people. We're not short on talent. And having we're such a diverse country, and there's so many changes that are happening on a daily basis, especially with new technologies coming out, that it's like we just need that. We need that turnover and that churn to, like we said earlier, maintain like that freshness of ideas and be receptive to like what's going on in the world, and actually make sure that the laws represent what the people genuinely want.
Yeah, there's an interesting tidbit here from one of Amadeo's sources, where let me see if I can find it exactly. I was looking at it earlier while we were talking. Dominant professions of members are public service, politics, business, and law. So very little science.
Yeah, they're predominantly, a lot of them, representatively, their education goes all the way to law school.
Yeah, 96% being college educated is interesting. I wonder what that 4% is, or who that 4%
Yeah,
is.
interesting. I would have thought it would have been actually 100.
Of just educated people.
Yeah. Members of Congress having a college education. I don't have an issue with it. I'm just more surprised.
Yeah, that's
Very
true.
Christian dominant. Very interesting. Average length is even in here. For the 118th, it was 8.5 years for the House, and then 11.2 years for the Senate.
Oh, it's interesting.
Not as well. I guess
thought they'd
when
be
you think
higher.
about the terms and the term limits,
Yeah.
that is 4 consecutive. Well, just for the numbers, 8.5 year. That's a little over 4 terms for House, and then for senators, it's less than 2 years. So that's interesting. And that's it, but Senate terms.
That's
Yeah,
so
it
interesting.
has
So
Senate
cool.
terms too. 4.3 House terms, 1.9 Senate terms.
I mean, based on those types of, like based on that information, it's almost like there is just a time frame kind of limit barrier almost already implemented that people just naturally follow then. But like, with that being said, I do think at this point, if you go to that other article, the Pew Research, there's definitely a change in who's in Congress now. At this point, I believe the House is more predominantly Gen X and millennials on the rise. A lot of Gen Z are just coming of age to actually be in Congress. And the Senate has representatively more boomers, but I think we're churning towards the future. I think as we progress and we just keep talking about these things, I think we'll see maybe some of the corruption and the power kind of leave from the certain. It seems to be a demographic of people in Congress.
Because it seems like younger people have a different worldview on politics than some of these older generations. And I think that's very evident from, we fall into that age group, right? To anyone you talk to seems to have very similar ideas when it comes to what public service should look like. And so I think as those people retire or, term limits help to force people to retire earlier, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what the whole point of them is. But that's just how it is, man.
Notice that the Senate is still majority boomer silent, 66 to 100.
Yeah, and that makes sense because you have the 6 years there, and I think it's a little bit easier to maintain.
When's the next
power in this?
It's every 2 years they do a third, right?
Yeah,
of
a third of
elections.
them.
So that's coming up next year, right?
next year.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how this will change for next year
Mm-hmm.
coming up, if this will shift over in favor of more Gen X. We have no Gen Z. Oh, wait, we do have one Gen Z, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
A couple millennials.
Yeah, I think
in the House. Yeah.
In the, specifically the House and the Senate.
Yeah. I got you. Amadeo, anything else you wanted to kind of touch on with the term limits and stuff? Any final points?
On top of term limits, maybe we should consider like other things such as age limits.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, comparable to like working in a business, right? You want to work in a business where you can perform a task, a job at a high level, and then when maybe the ability to actually fulfill the job and the level that you're performing at is not maintained, then we should probably consider retiring. I know you brought up something earlier. I think it was the Japanese parliament, right? I'm not sure.
The judicial system has age limit of 70.
Which
We'll get to later as well.
that doesn't seem unreasonable, but something of the sort. I mean, much like people retire out of a job, there should probably be an upper age limit to Congress as
And in
well.
fact, if you look at even like a lot of military positions, U.S. Marshals, Secret Service, they actually have forced retirement ages because they've determined that beyond a certain age, you're not necessarily capable of performing your job at full capacity like you're able to. And that same exact argument, I think, can be applied to members of Congress because I mean, they're making decisions that literally affect the entire nation, right?
Absolutely.
And I totally understand, people staying in those positions, but there's just a point. All of us age. Everyone who reaches that older age where cognitively you're just not as sharp as you used to. And I think anyone will agree with that. And so that kind of brings up the question is like, shouldn't we force people after a certain age also? Maybe you shouldn't be making the most important decisions that affect every single American's lives at that age, and maybe we should have someone else a little bit younger taking that over. It totally makes sense.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of people would agree with that. And,
Especially with the 118th Congress being, everybody on average being over 55.
yeah,
Senate
so
being 64, that's
64. Most places,
64.
people are retired by 64, 65, 66, right?
yep,
That's
maybe not
average.
anymore.
Yeah.
not anymore,
Not
but
anymore.
that was last year. That was the last term's
Last
Congress.
session, yeah.
Last session. But this year, this session's is getting younger, so it's good news that we're moving in a younger direction.
Yeah. I think the additional benefit of having age limits is that it would force that turnover, force that churn, and it would help ensure that there'd be younger representation. And I think that'd be a lot more representative of the actual population, and younger individuals would be more in touch with current cultural events, technology, things of that nature, and which would lead to better decisions and better lawmaking. Because if you're just too out of touch with your voters, with the world, with how things are going, and you just don't keep up anymore, then sure, you can have advisors and staff and other individuals that tell you what's going on and inform you, but it's completely different versus like a lived experience, right? And so I think, age limits would be a good thing.
It's a good guardrail to protect against,
Yeah.
you know, ensuring that the decisions that are made are made with the right capacity.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, talking about guardrails, right? I think money in politics is one of the biggest issues that we
Bro.
kind of have in today's world, right? I think
Don't get me started.
I think a lot of people can see where money in politics can kind of go wrong, and our system is sort of set up on that because in order to become an elected official, you need to put together a campaign, raise funds in order to give yourself a realistic chance to actually be selected or elected into office. And so that kind of brings up the question is, what do you guys think the extent of money in politics should be? Should we not be there at all? Should we have a little bit? Do there need to be safeguards? What are your opinions on this?
I like how you put it. The one time we were like talking a couple days ago, where I believe that there shouldn't be any money in politics. That the government we should have publicly funded elections, and basically, like the way you put it, it's an operating cost. The government needs to have a president. The government needs to have elected officials and everything else. So like it should, because that's what the government needs and demands through the Constitution and other documents and laws. The government should front the bill. It's like, hey, like I'm requiring this of the people, that we have these individuals that are elected. We're gonna foot the bill, right? Like the taxpayers are gonna pay for it. And the one thing I will say is, like, I know a lot of people are gonna say, well, I don't want my taxes to go up, and I don't want to be paying for people's $1 billion campaigns and stuff like that. It's like, that's not what I'm getting at. There's so many other ways that you can have elections and campaigns that don't require money, like internet, for example. The government can just like put up a website and have all the candidates listed on there, and use social media.
They can come up with money to bail out Wall Street. I think we can find money to publicly fund elections.
The point
Exactly.
being a level playing field.
Yeah, absolutely.
Level
Level playing field. I mean, I don't know the details and the technicalities of how it would work, but yeah, I think like publicly funded elections, absolutely.
And we could look into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because obviously money in politics means people with more money control more politics. It's really kind of just like a simple formula, right? And one of the most controversial judicial cases a lot of people know is Citizens United, right? 2010 case that kind of allowed super PACs and PACs to gain lots of traction and control in our government, right? And
Do you know a little bit more about the case? Or like what Citizens United did?
Yeah, so it's pretty much allowed corporations and unions to raise and spend unlimited amounts of money on elections. And not only that, you don't have to disclose who's donating money, for example, to a super PAC. So you have that anonymity that sort of attaches itself to that decision. Now, judiciary pretty much said that this is an act of free speech. Donating to political campaigns is an expression of free speech. But obviously, this is extremely controversial because,
well, yeah.
Let's be real. Most people can tell this is against the interests of the American people, right? This allows large corporations, extremely wealthy people to come in, give tons of money to influence politics, and we don't even know who they are because they don't have to disclose that, right? So I think most people can see past that, and that's why it's extremely controversial, because people feel like, I thought the government is supposed to protect what's right for the American citizens, and a lot of people feel that that is a direct attack on that.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. Absolutely rightfully so. And so that kind of brings up the idea of dark money in politics. And we actually have an article here pulled up. From 2020, there was $1 billion of dark money in politics, meaning like, you know, anonymous donors, money coming in, no one knows what it's for, who it's coming from. That jumped to 1.9 billion, almost doubled in one election cycle over 4 years. So you could tell how Citizens United sort of opened up the floodgates when it comes to dark money, and we see more and more and more progressively get into Congress. And this is why people are fed up.
Yeah.
It's actually crazy that it's every 2 years here. So that doesn't mean it's just.
I mean, I think
presidential.
I believe it's taking into consideration, obviously, the House of Representatives that comes in every 2 years.
So it's not, and it doesn't just impact presidential, right?
Not just presidential.
And that's the point. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so,
Holy
you know,
shit.
it's a really controversial thing. And I just really don't know what to say because the judiciary determined that it's constitutional and that it's like, now what? It's maybe constitutional, but it's not right.
It's interesting that you can see it also go down for direct spending versus contributions of facts, which doesn't really tell us the whole story because that money could have just been funneled into PACs, right? So now we don't even know how much of this is really genuine money from
I think direct spending.
direct spending. Is
If I'm
per
not
person.
mistaken, it just like goes directly to. I'm assuming it goes directly to the candidate, and then contributions to super PACs are like for example, if you're running for president, direct spending would be me giving money directly to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, versus
And so
giving
the
it to
super
a super
PAC is the
PAC.
middleman. But what's interesting is that it did go down. So that either means
Direct
people
spending?
are going through the middleman.
Oh,
instead,
yeah.
Or they're just not doing it at all.
Yeah, because if you can hide how much you're donating into who, then dude, like
It did sharply drop for presidential from 80.7 in 2020 to 42.9.
I mean, if you
direct
want
spending.
if you want to influence politics, this is a beautiful strategy. The problem is that like
It did
It's-
slightly drop, but it
isn't
wasn't
right.
It wasn't a main election cycle, right?
And what's kind of ironic too is we're all sitting here thinking about this, and it's not just the four of us. If you pull up that other article, this is one of the most bipartisan issues in America. Pretty much, well over 70% of Republicans, Democrats, Independents think that there's way too much money in politics and don't like the way it's structured. The opposition is only about 10 to 15% anywhere you look. So that shows you that it's ironic that something like this has so much support from the public that it's wrong, and yet nothing happens. Nothing.
it reminds me, sort of related, sort of unrelated. It reminds me of there was a study done that showed, in short, I'm not going to go into many details, but in short, the more money you have, or like the wealthier you are, the more affluent you are, the more likely a law that you will be passed based on like your preference or like your opinion, right? And so I might be able to find the article and like add it to the episode in the video, but basically like, it showed that like low income individuals, no matter how much you support or oppose a policy, the chances that it'll get like passed or not passed remain the same. But the more money you have, the more you support legislation, the more likely it's going to get passed, which is totally unfair as well. Because it's like, well, we're supposed to be a government that represents all the people and not just the wealthy.
Exactly, and that's where everything becomes controversial. Luke, if you want to scroll down a little bit, right there, go down a little bit more. Yeah, so views on limiting the role of money in politics. You could see total 72% support and 11% against, and it breaks it down: 71 for Republican support, 76 for Democrats. So this is across the aisle. Doesn't matter which political party, which camp you fall into, people support it. And yet no one talks about it. No one does anything about it. News doesn't really cover it at all either. And so that begs to ask the question, why? Why is something with so much support not get talked about?
I think it kind of goes back to what you're saying, that they've deemed it constitutional enough that it's not more focused on, or like to some degree villainized in the whole institution itself. Because if you think about it on a state level, right? If people were more engaged on a state level, then there would be more of a representation of the people, right? But right now, since kind of going to like what you said about affluence, most people are just, your regular people, 9 to 5 type of person, right? So that doesn't leave much affluence, but inclusion in government. And if you look at this, these are the people that are probably affecting it, the more affluent, right? And we're not doing anything. We're not necessarily doing anything about it because of the affluent that are already gonna funnel their money and just sway it all in general,
So what's the question is, what do we do? Like, what is the action to even start fixing this.
Overturn Citizens United. That's 1st and foremost.
You almost like, as a citizenry, we have to demand it because look, it says only about 11% of people, and that's probably the most powerful people in America, or like some kind of financial standing, because who else would
Benefit from this, yeah.
benefit from that, right? And so it's hilarious how something with that little support can get passed. That is directly against the interests of the American people.
Yeah.
And so that puts everything into question. Does the government actually work for us? Does it actually work for its own people? And this tells you no.
Yeah.
This is data that tells you no.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, exactly. I mean, dude,
That's
like,
so
I looked at it,
much.
I'm like, 72%, yeah, that's a lot. Bro, 72% is like massive. That's more than 2/3.
Right.
That's almost 3/4 of the country.
Which politically means that should be amended like today.
Absolutely.
in theory.
Like, yeah, where's...
And look at that, 16% is not sure
And
also.
that's 16, exactly. They're not sure. And they might not be sure because they just don't know enough information. But you present them the information, I'm sure that 72 is going to bump up.
Get closer to 80, right? And
Yeah.
so again, this is an important issue that I think a lot of people need to think about, need to discuss, and hopefully it's something that we're going to be able to resolve. And the first step is always bringing up the issues and discussing them, having that, presenting the ideas that actually matter. And I really do think that sometimes media's job is to like distract you from the issues and the policies that actually people care about and the ones that matter. And that's not to say that other things that they're covering are not important, because they are. But sometimes it's, there are more pressing issues that more people care about. It's just they're never really discussed in that way.
Yeah. No, it's super sad and unfortunate. I mean, dude, like, what really irks me is that we live in this society and we live in this country where so many people think this way, but the government is kind of just doing, well, I was going to say doing what it wants, but not necessarily. Like, it just, government does what big business and big donors want. And it's like, bro, well, what about me? I live in this country too. I pay my taxes. I'm a good citizen. What about me?
And
Just because I don't got the money, what, now, like, my voice doesn't count?
And let's point out what they want has a tendency to come in direct conflict with what is in the best interest of the masses of American people.
Yeah, because private interests have too much of an impact and influence in politics. Bro, no, don't
You
get me.
privatize profits and you socialize losses. That's how you do it.
Don't get me started, man.
That's how that stuff works, right? But again, it's everything is just kind of set up. The way money comes in and out is set up in such a complicated way that your average person just doesn't know, doesn't understand how it works. You can't necessarily point the finger at one person. It's like everyone has plausible deniability. And no one's accountable.
You know why? Sorry, Luke, really quick. This goes to what we were talking about in the first episode. Information is power. The reason why they hide who donates, how much money to which parties and everything else is because they don't want you to have that information. Why not? So that you can't point the finger and say, oh, these guys donated this much to this person and these are the results. This is all the laws and legislation. This is why it got bad. Let's boycott that business or let's boycott this person. No, like, we don't know who's behind the scenes doing all this stuff. What are you going to say?
Yeah, because it's all anonymous.
I think now it doesn't matter. We should just it is Congress. It is now Congress. It's out. Congress says it's in their court to do something about it.
Yeah,
it is to do amendment. I mean, this is a serious amendment to.
But then the question is, what if the judiciary steps in again and says it's a violation of free speech, and here we are back to square one?
Constitutional. I think it goes back to what I'm saying.
That is a good point.
Civil engagement on a state level needs to become more represented so that we as people can influence the federal level of legislation, because things won't necessarily change unless we all change statewide as well,
Gotcha.
I think that's really
So you're saying there should be some kind of state representative that advocates, or certain amount of state representatives that advocate on behalf of the people from their state in Congress, the same way a corporation or an extremely wealthy individual might be able to.
Absolutely.
well,
we already have them.
yeah, we already have that because that's what Congress is. But
The problem is, but
they're not doing
the judicial branch doing that ruling does really put a huge hindrance. You are right about that, because that is That's not something they will lightly repeal.
Jesus, we need to like create an accountability representative or something
That
like
is
that.
crazy.
I feel like that would
Actually
make
make
sense.
sure that the people that are representing you are actually
So,
trying to represent you.
You know what's funny? There is a government accountability office, the GAO. That's like a legitimate thing.
To be fair, one
GAO,
angle
yeah.
that they could do is amend the First Amendment to make an exception for elections and say an even playing field election.
They could.
Now, yeah, how it would happen is,
I don't know if I'd amend the first.
but you have to if the judicial government has. And so I'm just getting into my idea is that because the judicial has set such a high bar, excuse me, a high bar for this case of freedom of speech in relation to spending. Well, now you have to attack the First Amendment as well.
No, you can just the Supreme Court. They would just have to overturn their decision.
I don't. That's gonna be. I feel like that's a taller order than it is to just.
No, because to have an amendment, you need
for sure.
a significant
For sure.
majority to like vote and stuff. So
Yeah.
Right, the numbers
have
are
an
the problem
amendment,
with that.
Yeah.
And I agree with that aspect. But now, if it's in the judicial side that they need to make that fix, then I think we're going to be waiting for a long time.
So we were talking about money in politics before we got onto this topic, but the money in politics doesn't only influence like races and things of that nature. Who was that one justice who was receiving all those donations and
Clarence
contributions?
Well, vacations.
Yeah,
Clarence Thomas.
dude, come on. The corruption runs so deep, bro. Like these people are just dude, no. This is why stuff like this gets passed and rulings like this are made, because again, those backdoor deals and bribes and like the vacations and yachts and all this other stuff, like the justices, bro, like the people that benefit from this are the ones giving some kickbacks to the ones that help. No, it's so corrupt and just
People who use their money to influence, for example, certain people in certain positions, they understand that the weight of that decision that person is going to pass can mean millions, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars for them. So it is in their best interest to ensure a vote goes one way. And so
absolutely.
I mean, just connect the dots here.
Yeah.
Like really just connect all the dots and show that these are pretty much parameters set to allow corruption to happen. Let's just call it out really what it is, right? Because we need to stop hiding behind like, oh, that's not true. They ruled this. No.
Yeah.
These are avenues of corruptions that have been legalized to make sure that they're not legal.
Yeah. No, then we need to put a stop to it.
Yeah.
Join together, help us.
Right.
But
But there are still other issues at hand,
yeah.
like gerrymandering.
A lot of other different ways to influence, how voting goes.
Yeah, so we can touch on gerrymandering a little bit, because I feel like it sort of plays into what we've talked about first with age limits, term limits, but so gerrymandering, for those who don't know, is a practice of redrawing legislative and congressional district lines. And so every 10 years, the United States conducts a census to understand who's living in this country and understand the demographics of different areas. And following the census, legislative and congressional district lines are redrawn. And the purpose of this is to can you actually go back one tab, Luke, to the episode tab?
Sure.
So the purpose of gerrymandering is to essentially intentionally manipulate district boundaries, which discriminates against different groups of voters and weakens their overall voting power. And so the practice of drawing district maps will benefit one party, and you can do this by grouping voters together or breaking them apart. And if you go to that second article, Extreme Gerrymandering, and scroll down to those diagrams, these show an example of how there's 4 districts here. So the thick vertical black lines here show the different districts. And in this diagram, 2 districts will get a red seat and 2 districts will get a blue seat. Because 2 districts have more red cubes, 2 districts have more blue. On the second diagram, we see that it's the exact same layout of red cubes and blue cubes. The only difference is how this district got sliced. And so now the thick black lines are horizontal and each rectangle is a different district. In this example, all 4 seats go to the blue party, or in this case, it's the Democratic Party. Even though the representation is the same in these 2 examples, how you draw the districts impacts who wins the election. This practice is extremely undemocratic because it literally influences people. Our vote essentially doesn't really matter too much because it gets controlled who we're going to vote for. Because in the United States, you have single member districts where only 1 member per district gets elected. And so let's say that in your district, 51% of the people vote for candidate A and 49% of people vote for candidate B. Well, candidate A is going to win even though they only got 51% of the vote. Almost half of the people didn't want candidate A to win, but that person's going to win no matter what. That's what happens in single party districts. And
in a funny way, it also happened with presidential elections, if you think about it. We have, 2 now or 3, where it's been a popular vote did not necessarily reflect the electoral vote.
Trump and Clinton in 2016.
Al Gore and Bush in 2000.
Yeah, sort of. That touches on the electoral college, but yeah, the concept's very similar, where like the person who maybe shouldn't have won did win.
Yeah.
And so gerrymandering helps, or like single member districts can, single member districts and gerrymandering are both practices that like go sort of hand in hand, but they're not beneficial. One way to combat it is to have multi-party districts where multiple candidates are elected from one district. And so like, let's say you have 3 candidates running for your district and you need at least, I don't know, I'm totally making this up on the fly, but like 30% of the vote. And so you get 2 candidates, each get like 45 and 45%, and then the third candidate only gets 10%. Well, then those 2 candidates with the most got elected, right?
Yeah.
And so that'd be more fair representation because, okay, well, now there's multiple, the gerrymandering wouldn't have as big of an influence. Another way to combat gerrymandering is through proportional districts. So drawing the district maps in such a way that the representation within the district is proportional and representative of the population. So it's not, you don't get like these weird shapes, for example, like what we're looking at now. It's a lot more fair and equitable and democratic. And so money in politics, the fact that people can stay in politics as long as they want, gerrymandering, all these practices, like it's the illusion of choice. We think we vote for who we want and we live in a democratic country and society, but really it's not the case.
Yeah. And I think what happens is like all these issues that we were discussing, if you add them up, the money in the politics, the gerrymandering, all that stuff, every single one is like a little chisel and it chips away at the democratic process.
Yeah.
And it takes power away from the voters and the people and takes away people's voices and starts amassing that power in the hands of a few people who benefit from the system being shaped in this way.
The one thing I will say really quick is I'm happy it's not like this, but you were saying if you add up all these little bits and pieces that chip away, that it's extremely undemocratic. I guess on the one hand, it's very smart that we do have the illusion of choice because then like we're placated, right? People are pacified that at least we think we have a choice. But if I was like really evil and really just wanted to conquer the world, I would take advantage of the fact that the system is skewed to those in power and those with money and like just exploit it fully to just like, okay, you might think you have the illusion of choice, but no, like I'm going to go all the way and just like conquer the world.
If I had like tons of power, like when you really think about it, that's how I do it. I'd present 2 things and I'd just buy off the 2 things.
Buy both. Buy both
You're
options.
choosing between one or the other. I don't care which one you choose because I got both of them in my pocket.
It's like arms dealers who sell arms to both sides of the conflict. They don't care who buys them. They just care people buy them.
That's like a good analogy to like
Oh.
kind of phrase that exactly.
Dude, and it makes the world a worse place.
It's interesting that the way that gerrymandering works is kind of like similar to how city layouts are, and like redlining and the ability to buy certain properties based off your demographic or to live in certain areas, and how that affects like the funding for education in those areas as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, because it's very much what we're seeing right here. Like, you know,
Yeah.
this district, yeah, like you said, if we slice the cheese this way, then it's gonna be stinkier over here. But if we slice the cheese over here, it's fragrant.
Yeah.
Better.
Yeah, and kind of what you were saying about redlining, I'll just add this really quick, or how like different demographics get pushed out of different areas and neighborhoods and communities based on property values and a handful of other factors. Then when people go to draw the district maps, they're like, oh, well, this demographic all got bunched into here. So like, we're going to draw one big district around all of them to just put them all in one district. We know which way they're going to vote. So it doesn't matter because we're just going to put them all in the same spot. And so now you have all 50,000 people who are going to vote for one person in one district. And then all the other districts, even if they have fewer votes, they're going to vote for like your preferred party. Instead of taking that like 50,000 people and, for example, splitting it in half. And now you have two districts that vote for that party.
This way your party gets 4 representatives, theirs get 1 instead of it being 3-2 or 2-3 or something like that, right?
Yeah. And it's, like
The
in
corruption
this,
runs deep.
yeah, like in this example where like green in charge, because based on how you drew it, 5 green districts and 1 purple district on the left-hand side. But if you just slice the pie evenly, well, now you have 2 green districts and 4 purple districts. And there's like a million ways to slice and dice this. And this is what people do. They sit here and figure out, how can we do this?
How can we draw this up to benefit my agenda?
And you know
or
what's funny?
Beneficial for me.
Yeah, and they walk this fine line where it's like, okay, well, how do we make this so it's favorable for us, but it's not so disproportionate and so unfair that we start getting sued and like, you know, taken to court for it, and it's found unconstitutional. Because there have been cases where some district maps have been thrown out or not accepted because they're drawn in such a way that it becomes unconstitutional. I'm like, this whole practice is unconstitutional.
Interesting.
But anyway,
It's honestly like a shame. I'm like disappointed in this country and the way these things operate and the way they take the power out of our hands and just give it to, we don't really know who, because we can keep it anonymous now, right?
exactly. Yeah.
And it should infuriate any listener. It should infuriate all of you because it is so deeply unfair and undemocratic.
Yeah.
That it really should enrage people, and you should feel like you want to do something about it.
Yeah, and like I personally, my politics, I do have a preference for one party over another. But when it comes to this kind of stuff, I don't care. Like I don't care. This needs to be fair for everybody. Sure, would I prefer that like my candidates win? Absolutely, because it's in my best interest. However, I'm not thinking of just my best interest, and that's what I think a lot of people need to stop doing. Just thinking about yourself. Like, we all live in this country together. We all exist on this planet together. We need to work together. We need to think about everyone, because all of our best interests are invested in a full and transparent democracy. It's just, yeah, man, it's a shame.
I think people should be more enraged, and I think that comes from informing, having that information, knowing what's going on just right in front of our faces. So this is always going to be what needs to be spoken about, because people aren't enraged enough because they don't know enough.
Because information's withheld because it's the most important and valuable commodity.
Yep.
Oh, man.
Or it's conflicted too. Don't forget you got to release. Because one person says this, one person says this, one person says this, and you have lots of conflicting information too, right? That can also be a tactic. So.
Yeah. Oh, man. Anyway.
So regardless of all that, I think the other crux of the whole system is the lack of a multi-party system, really. And I think because of that, it kind of severely hinders this country to adapt to a better, or at least maybe a more flexible, and flexible here is very loose, but flexible in terms of different ideas to be welcomed in the government infrastructure. It's been a pretty two-party heavy system really since its conception, although maybe the earlier years it wasn't so much of the case, but really at the start of the 20th century, right? And I had done a little research just to look at what was out there with the multi-party systems in America. So I could share a little bit of that. And yeah, Wikipedia isn't the greatest source, but at least it gives us an idea of what's going on today. So, and we have it here captured on visual. So what I'm showing here is the a summary of the current state of parties in terms of the government, and then additional parties and smaller bits of information like their state legislations and membership counts. And let me see if I can zoom this in a little bit here so everybody can see it a bit better. Okay, cool. Of course, we know good old Republican Party and Democratic Party, two of the major players. Then we have a couple of smaller ones. I'm actually going to skip from the top one because here I think is the easier way to see what we already know. Everybody knows a little bit about the Libertarian Party. That's always kind of the black sheep of the presidential election process. We always put that, and even the Green Party occasionally in terms of the numbers. I did find it interesting that there is a no labels party, and they have legitimately no label, not even a color to go with it. Very central.
Right in the center.
Yeah, right in the center.
No candidates.
Yeah. And the question is, well, why is that the case? And so to just keep looking a little further, there are parties out there. They are on the map barely. We don't have any third party. The first thing I noticed is that we don't have any third party on all 50 states. For some reason, Wikipedia here shows 51. I don't know why. I couldn't figure out what was the 51st. I think it's Puerto Rico, but I don't understand the
That or it might be
system.
DC.
I couldn't find any of their main sources on where this 51 number is coming.
It might be DC.
DC. Yeah, that would make sense. Actually, that's the weird part, because then I scroll down here and DC is here. So I don't know what
Plus
the hell.
DC.
The district, since that's its own, it's a weird quasi-state.
It's funny because we're looking at all these parties, but there's also like a stigma when you vote for these parties. People tell you you're throwing your vote away.
Exactly.
If you vote for it,
Exactly.
right? So it's not only, it's like, why don't more people vote for this? We do it to ourselves by telling you that you're wasting your vote if you're voting a certain way.
Propaganda.
I think it's one. I think that's one of two reasons. And the second reason, and I'm going to just skip through this, but this is a good piece to just get a visual of what's out there. And even just the numbers, you can see that it's not very impressive. I don't think any of these third parties even break 1 million in terms of membership.
They don't, honestly,
none of them do.
and the highest percentage that I saw was like 0.5% with, can you scroll up to that first
Are
chart?
you thinking that?
Yeah, right
Yeah,
here. The Green Party with 0.5% of the vote.
Well, that's
what are you going to
that's
do
for
with
2024.
Yeah.
Yeah, so last year during the elections, the Green Party only got 0.5% of the, dude,
Last
you
election
can't do
cycle-
anything with that. What are you?
Yeah, last election cycle or the 2016, I think it was 3%.
3?
3%.
Oh,
It was the biggest. It was the biggest result. It was Jorgensen and I can't remember the.
But still, look, 3% ain't
Right.
going to win you anything.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with that stigma. I do want to bring up, because I was researching into the Libertarian Party, as that is the most common party to see on the ballot, usually above all the other third party.
It's the most popular minority.
Right, the popular minority, the underdog, as one might say. I did look into a little bit of just a look of their presence as well as a little bit of their history. So for their presence, I'm going to skip the history part, but for their presence, I do notice that their website doesn't look very strong. Now, I'm not saying that that's a great indicator, because it is just a website and you just have a front to get things started. But I like to imagine that there should still be something to show relevance, constant. It's like a living, breathing website that constantly updates. Things are happening. Tell us about it. I noticed none of that on the Libertarian Party's website, which is, by the way, lp.org, I believe. Let me double check my sources. lp.org. So that's actually pretty cool. So like, for example, I'm going to click into this one. So what I'm showing now is their news page. Last updated May 27th of last year.
Oh, wow.
Not very impressive. 3, 4, 5, so about a good amount of articles for last year, but I'm thinking this is more like a election cycle kind of thing. So maybe we won't see any this year and only until next year when congressional elections become relevant again. Great, whatever. I can't really click into this because I don't think we'll be able to see it, but when you don't have an account, for example, on Twitter, well, you just get a bunch of meme stuff, as you can see, pretty heavily.
There are a lot
Hey,
of
don't
those.
knock memes. Political cartoons.
Still strong.
Always used,
It's I think it's a new way of political cartoons.
Picture says 1,000 words.
When I logged in and actually looked at their page, it is actually pretty active. I mean, they're putting out things of what's going on. Right. What's going on out in different districts. They did have saying like, hey, come, turn up for this stuff. Great. That looks all good. But when it comes to their history, just this year, and let me go to my notes, this year, their previous chairman, or chair, I guess, it's the head of the chair, something like that, Angela McArdle, who was the head at the time of the 2024 elections, actually steps down due to spoiler tactic. Now, for those folks that might not know what spoiler tactic is, I didn't even know what this was until I started looking into it. I'm not going to get too deep into the video, but there is one picture I want to show, which is the thumbnail. Luckily, it's not going to be playing. Basically, the gist is that one party that should, in theory, win the election doesn't, because a subsection of that dissents and causes the votes to go to another party, wasting it, causing the one that shouldn't have won to win. So in this case, the first column wouldn't have won because the second column, if there wasn't this third column, would have won the election, but didn't because of that spoiler system.
So what you're saying is it might create a plurality instead of a majority, right?
As a result, right. And as we talked about earlier, which it's hard to go against this, multi-party voting, as well as, what is that word for it? The merit-based voting, or like the ranking voting?
Ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice voting, exactly. Would have mitigated this a lot better to making folks' voices more accurately, or at least getting a better feel for what people would have preferred, not just to say winner takes all, top piece. So that's one bit. And the reason, so to go back why I brought that up is because this lady had resigned because she had leveraged using spoiler tactics. Doesn't really explain in detail what exactly happened, but it was believed that this tactic got Ross Ulbricht, who was the founder of Silk Road, pardoned by Trump as a favor to Angela McArdle to get to do this dirty tactic. So they stepped down, and also they funneled money out of the party to their families' personal estate.
For
Money in politics.
Right, money in politics.
Even
Very
in the third parties.
Very interesting, yeah. So what I want to get at is, I think one aspect, you're right, it is this wasted vote feeling, but I also think the other one is these people need to get their shit together. Because if you're seeing this year, just a couple of months ago, it doesn't look very good, especially if this is supposed to be the third best party
Third biggest,
in America. Not even the third biggest, really, because just looking on these numbers, 722,000 is what they claim. American Independent Party beats them slightly, and there is actually one more party. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. Sorry. Yeah, American Independent Party at 861,000.
You can sort that column.
Right. For some reason, one of these numbers actually comes out wrong. I don't know why. This one down here. But yeah, 861. So there's American Independent Party from California, which is oddly far right for some reason. I thought that was very interesting. So there must be some really interesting stuff going on in California's politics. But the gist is, even number-wise, they're not, but they don't have any presence barely any presence, but really not any presence in the presidential elections, which I imagine most of us on the mindset see it as kind of the holy grail of all elections. Every 4 years, that cycle. Right?
Yeah. For our viewers and ourselves, I just want to touch on tactical voting really quick, and then ranked choice voting, just to make sure we can cover those well. So can you click? So were you saying that, like, tactical voting is a method that actually, are you familiar with tactical voting? A little
Refresh
bit.
my memory. Maybe I do. But
Oh, I was hoping you might know.
Oh,
But
okay.
I guess if I'm not mistaken, or like one
can always look it up.
strategy.
Let's-
Yeah.
Let's look it up. Let's
Yeah.
learn about tactical voting, kids.
So
Yeah,
while we're looking up tactical voting, I'll touch on. You might have to give it a second.
Yeah, I see it.
There
we go.
Ranked choice voting is also a way to make elections.
Damn, dude, this thing's crazy. Sorry.
Well, I guess more like democratic or more effective. But all right, you have tactical voting.
Strategic or tactical voting.
Is voting in consideration of possible ballots cast by other voters in order to maximize one's satisfaction with the election results. Shows that no voting system has a single always best strategy, one that always maximizes the voter's satisfaction with the result.
Oh, so there's actually even a subsection of these strategic votings.
Lesser
Lesser
evil.
evil.
Yeah, so, okay, the lesser evil, sorry, stay here for a second.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like what happened with the 2024 elections, where not many people were happy with Kamala, not many people were happy with Trump, but they were like, well, I'm voting for Kamala because she's the lesser of the two evils, right? And so you might not want Kamala to win either, but you definitely don't want Trump to win, so you're going to vote against Trump instead of for Kamala, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's one of many. There's the burial one.
A voter ranks or rates a candidate lower in the hope of defeating them. For example, a voter may increasingly rank or rate a
That's really
perceived strong
important.
candidate last in order to help. Oh, okay.
I mean, it's interesting when you look at these types of strategies because I don't know, it kind of begs the question why then do the other parties fail if these are the primary strategies for the bigger parties, then that's kind of the reasoning why, you know?
Sort of. I mean, I remember like hearing during presidential elections that, yeah, there were third parties, but the mentality of, well, not enough people are going to vote for them anyway. So like, even if I cast
Herd
my vote,
mentality.
yeah, because so now you have, I can't remember. Maybe this was in the 2020 election that it happened, or I can't remember which one. But let's say you have like three candidates, right? You have three parties. You have a Republican candidate, you have a Democratic candidate, and you have a third party. And let's say you are you lean Democratic and you want to vote for the Democratic candidate. Or no, let's say you prefer and you want the independent to win, but you definitely don't want the Republican to win. And so now you have the three choices. You have the Republican, you have the Democrat, and you have the third party. And you say, okay, well, I definitely don't want the Republican to win, but I'm not going to vote for my preferred candidate, the independent, because I know for sure they are not going to win because not enough people are going to vote for them. So I'm going to vote for the Democratic candidate or what happens is if everyone who thinks that way did vote for the independent still most likely would not have enough votes to win, but now the Democratic candidate definitely doesn't have any votes. And it's been referred to like as stealing votes from like one party or moving votes from one party. And so then in that instance, the Republican candidate would win. And it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to vote for who I actually want because I'm going to vote for the next best choice to prevent the person who I don't want to win from winning.
God, this is all so stupid, man. It's just like, okay, wait. Hey, people, stop being sheep. If you want to vote for someone, be an independent adult and vote for them. Don't let others dissuade you.
If not
or
that,
else nothing will ever change.
if not
What he
that,
said.
then at least
Thank you.
rank-based voting definitely should happen.
Yeah.
And it seems like when we were talking about these other pieces, it only emphasizes and strengthens the position and idea that rank-based voting should be happening. And I think it's
choice voting.
Right, sorry, ranked choice voting should be happening. I think it is a little bit of a fumble from the founding fathers, and maybe for good reason. It is the initial start of something completely new. So it's a mix of things. Obviously, they didn't expect where we are today to have happened, right? 250 years later. But for a mix of things, the free speech, the technology, weapons, all that jazz.
I don't think George Washington would understand how AI models work.
But I think there's still some things that make a little bit of sense that I'm sure they would have felt just as much of the same way they do today. Not meddling in foreign affairs, for example, right? Or funneling money, or this corruption aspect. Or really, I think, and I just think of this as a very, very subjective thought. I bet they would have been okay with ranked choice voting. Especially as this country had evolved. And I also wanted to mention, and I've mentioned it before, we have 535 members of Congress for 350 million people to be represented under. Mm-hmm. And that comes out to almost 1 in 800,000, 900,000. It's an insane amount of people. Now, I did do some research on Japan's infrastructure, and I'm not going to get too deep into it because we don't have time, but I do want to mention that Japan's representative count, they do have a parliament system, but they do sort of have the similar House and Senate kind of aspect. They have something like 700 something members of Congress or Congress Parliament for 150 million people.
Damn.
So almost a little less than half as many people and almost double the amount of representatives. Not exactly, but significantly
more.
The proportions of representative to person is much healthier. It's about 150,000 if I remember right. It's in there. My math. So can I get my mouse?
Yeah, I wanted to go over ranked choice voting really quick.
Yeah.
So the way it works, ranked choice voting is when you go to the polls, you get a ballot and you can rank your candidates who you want to win. So in this example, we have 4 candidates, and what the voters would do is decide, okay, who do you want in first place? Who's your first choice? Who's your second choice, third choice, and fourth choice? And so you add this up, and then all the tallies get added, or the ballots get cast. And then here you can see that if one candidate has more than half of the first place votes, the election is over and the candidate wins. So in this example, Bella Bryson gets more than 50% and she just wins automatically. However, if not one single candidate gets that 50% threshold, then the candidate with the least amount of votes is eliminated. And then let's say I voted for Aaron Abbott as my first place choice. And as my second place choice, I put Bella Bryson. Since Aaron Abbott got the lowest amount and not one single candidate got 50%, Aaron Abbott is eliminated. So now, everyone who voted for Aaron Abbott as first place, now it goes to their second choice. So because my second choice was Bella Bryson, my vote goes to Bella Bryson.
I like this.
Because in this example, Bella Bryson, no candidate still got 50% of the vote. It goes to another round of voting. And so, in the next case, Deepika Dashi was the candidate in this round of voting, was a candidate with the least amount of votes. So now it would go to the third choice. So let's say my first choice was Aaron Abbott. He got eliminated. My second choice was Deepika Dashi. Well, she got eliminated. My third choice, let's say, was Bella Bryson. Well, my vote would then go to Bella Bryson. But because Carlos Cruz finally hit the 50%, he actually won the election.
It's like March Madness for politics. Kind of in a way. It's like a
Who do you think's gonna win?
You eliminate candidate after candidate.
It is. And so then it's here this way, it almost kind of solves the issue of, I'm going to vote for this person because they're the lesser of two evils. Well, now you can rank all of your evils.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This would actually be a really good implementation to Congress.
Because then more people might be inclined to vote for in this case, so going back to my example of you have the Republican candidate, Democratic candidate, and the independent, right? You have the 3 parties. And let's say the 4 of us don't want the Republican to win. and we, the four of us, want to vote for the independent. Well, it's like, okay, so then our first choice is going to be the independent. And if they don't hit that 50% threshold, well, our second choice is going to be the Democrat.
It doesn't waste the vote.
Exactly. It doesn't waste the vote
doesn't
because
waste
then
the vote.
you can still, like, your vote still counts and it gets ranked. And that way, it's not like, oh, I'll have to choose between the lesser of two evils. No, rank your evils at that point. And vote for who
Exactly.
you
All
want.
votes give every possible combination of what they want,
Yeah.
making them as maximizing their impact in election.
What's really interesting about this is I think this would really dissolve the parties in general. This would show us how people demographically would lean towards more parties than one. And never
Yeah.
It would like significantly weaken their power. Definitely.
It would shake up the parties for sure. Like the structures just
If
not
it,
have
if
just
it
the
can
two.
if they can get their act together too, though. Remember, they're not exempt from the corruption. Right?
True.
This is true. We saw that, right?
Yeah. But in combination with publicly funded elections, dude, this would become so much, the system would become so much better. There's a couple other things that would have to change in the whole like voting and electoral system. But if now you have publicly funded elections where any candidate can run and any individual can run and the government is going to cover the costs and you have ranked choice voting, it's like, all right, cool. Well, now that gives us so many more options because now it opens up the voting pool to literally everyone in the country that's eligible. And then your votes don't get wasted and you don't just kind of have to like toss it out the window. You can rank who you want to win.
Yeah.
Bro, it could, oh my God, it could be so, it could all be so
Assuming
simple, so much
assuming people
better.
do fulfill it fully as they're expected to. You know,
Yeah.
it's already hard to get people to go. Then to get them to fill out.
You mean
fully
the ballot and vote?
to go vote, and then on top of going to vote, to exhaust everything out. I feel like is another.
Well,
is
you can
another
provide that
factor.
information ahead of time,
Yeah.
and then like you can just break it down over a course of like a
Yeah.
couple days.
Yeah.
Fill out your ballot at home. Then when you show up, just
Yeah.
like punch it in.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, and I mean that kind of, man, it's just frustrating to see because we need these guardrails. The kind of everything that we kind of discuss, whether it's money in politics, whether it's gerrymandering, whether it's everything else. You know, these are guardrails that need to be up into place to prevent corruption. And I think us and a lot of people probably feel that those guardrails have been either hijacked, eliminated, reduced, or somehow distorted in some kind of way that they don't actually protect the citizens from certain dangers that people in power might unleash on them because of their decisions and the weight that they carry.
yeah,
And so I think it's very important for people to start realizing this, people to start speaking up. And hopefully our organization can kind of become like a safe haven for people being like, hey, if these are things that you agree with, if you think money shouldn't influence political decisions, if
Yeah.
you think democracy shouldn't be impeached on, you know, hey, I think we're your community, right?
oh, absolutely. Join together, guys. Support us. Support yourselves. Support democracy.
Yeah.
Join together, and together we can change the way the world will work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all I have.
Yeah. I think so. It's a wrap, right?
So we're up.
Thanks for tuning in. Till next time. Stay together.
Stay together, exactly.